Okay, so I wanted to do a little voiceover commentary for a couple leagues that I did yesterday. Hopefully, showcase some fun ideas y'all might want to try out. I'm not gonna preface the video by saying like, "Oh my God, these are insane leagues" or anything like that. Like I think they're both 4-1s. Uh, but the idea behind it is just wanted to try out Jun's Shadow with a blue splash for some counter magic. Michael Rapp did an article recently, which I don't have the link to, but if you're in the Shadow Cabal Discord, you can go check it out. And it was basically like showcasing some new Shadow lists with things like Shadow Mortality. And in a lot of his lists, he likes splashing blue in the sideboard for Flusterstorm. So I was like, hey, why not just give that a shot, see what happens, run it through a couple leagues. So this was like the initial kind of list I came up with. Big asterisk, and I'll talk about it more at the end of the video. There were some changes after this. Some cards worked out better or worse than expected. So I'll kind of mention a few of those once the video wraps up. But to start off, this is just kind of the basic list. Running 4 Dragon's Rage Channeler in this list because if my main thing is I just want to be able to stop opponents on a turn post board, then Channeler gives me like a little more value with the Flusterstorm. It's not going to end the game as quickly, but since I'm boarding in more instants and sorceries, it gets a little bit better than previously. So I figured I would just give it a shot because, I mean, I've played Channeler in like Grixis Shadow, and it's fantastic with counter spells. I haven't played it with counter spells in like these 4-color hybridish builds, so might as well test it out. Things I've cut from my last Shadow list for this one were, let's see, Kolaghan's Command, Grist, 3rd copy of Ren, Traverse the Yawgmoth for like a 7th 1-mana removal spell, and the 4 Dragon's Rage Channelers. So this is just kind of like where I started with the main deck. This is not a finely tuned list or like detailed numbers, anything like that. In the board, I just jammed in 4 copies of Flusterstorm because if I want to see the card, like I'm going to see the card. Spoiler. Or foreshadowing, sorry. 1 copy of Alpine Moon, 2 Terminate for like the big Murktides and Amulet Titans and things like that. 2nd copy of Kroxa for the grinding matchups, 2 Turoks for anything white based, 1 copy of EE, 4 copies of Soul Guide Lantern. In hindsight, could have cut some number of Soul Guides since one of the big decks that Soul Guide is great against is Living End. Flusterstorm also great against Living End. So if I'm running all these Flusterstorms, I don't need as many Soul Guide Lanterns. But that just gives you the list. So let's start going through the matches. And this looks like the first one. Alright. Start off with a fantastic loss of die roll. Opening hand's just like a good shadow hand. I've got removal into threat, into shadow, or I've got like fetch shock, bolt myself into second, bolt myself, really big shadow if we're up against like a combo deck where I need to get the clock going as fast as possible. Let me make sure my camera's in a good spot. Alright, so opponent mulligans to 5 so far, so like my first thought is, oh, Tron. Sweet. And I'm right. So then we rip Channeler off the top. Obviously a little bit better of a 1-drop play than Bolt. Let's just scry away a land. See an Ugin on top of their library, so the first thought is like, alright, we're probably pretty dead. Alright, so they've got Tron available next turn, and they've got an Ugin in hand. It's pretty low list of ways we get out of this. I decided to go for the Ragavan over the Tarmogoyf there. Uh, Ultimately, because I just wanted to get some sort of extra damage right this second, since I've got these lightning bolts. And then this, I don't get. I don't know why they're playing Forest Ancient Stirrings when they have the Tron land. Like, obviously, they likely don't have a payoff for 7 mana right there. So they're just, like, trying to set up for the next turn. But I feel like just getting the Tron lands out is fine. Like, obviously, I can't hand disruption a land, but maybe I have something like Turok main deck and make you discard the mine. So I just think getting the mine out on the battlefield is like the safer option. Should have talked through some of the lines there. I cast the lightning bolt on my upkeep just to try to get closer to like a hand disruption spell. Preferably a Thoughtseize instead of an Inquisition, because I really wanted to take the Ugin. But at least here, I know if they play Ugin and wipe my board, I do get to like untap with Ragavan. So now the plan is just like draw the Unholy Heat, kill the Ugin, but the plan is just to try to chip in with this Ragavan as much as I can and maybe find a bolt for lethal. Like, we take them down to Sanctum and a Karn Liberated. So I know I'm insulated for a turn against this Karn. Like, they can exile a land, but they can't get rid of both of my, or can't get rid of 2 lands, so I can still cast Ragavan. They can hit the hand, but I'm just going to ditch the Tarmogoyf if they do that. Alright, so they got Ulamog, but at the moment, unless their last draw was another Tron land, they don't have the mana to cast it. And I hit Relic off the Ragavan, decide to play it so that I can crack it for an extra draw step and another chance at finding Lightning Bolt. So worst case scenario here would have been 4th Tron land, cast Ulamog, hit 2 lands, Karn down tick on a 3rd land. Because then I have to decide between like cracking the treasure token or not. So they play, but they play Little Karn instead. So immediately we're just going to crack this relic and look for Bolt. So now they have active bridge, but I can take the Ulamog, so at least I'm not like dead to that. And then might as well play out my dudes. So here's a big walking ballista that they get off Karn. Second Ragavan doesn't do anything, but I'm not dead yet. Like, they can ping my Ragavan, hit, pump up. Was I dead? They could have pinged Ragavan. They have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they can pump it back up twice. So yeah, I was dead, and the opponent just like missed it. Because they wanted to get this second Karn for whatever reason. Huh. Interesting. Well, their extra draw gives me chances to draw out of it. So we're gonna bolt him in the face for lethal. I didn't even notice the first time playing that game that opponent just like straight up missed lethal there. Interesting. Alright, so sideboarding. against a list like this, I'm boarding out usually Unholy Heat before Bolt, because Bolt can always be used to like target myself, lower my life total. Board out a Ren, because like one of the last things you want to do in this matchup is Flood. And Ren getting back lands over and over is like meh. A lot of times I'll board out like the basic Swamp, because you're not afraid of Blood Moon and you just don't want to see those extra lands. My board ends here, like I said, were the 3 copies of Flusterstorm for like the 3 Unholy Heat. And then the Ren. What did I board in? Oh, the Alpine Moon for the Ren. So, fairly straightforward there. Opening hand, we've got turn 1 Ragavan, which is one of the better things I can do in the match. And then Thoughtseize, so like pretty easy keep. We've got Street Wraith to help find a better threat, hopefully. And then if that better threat is like a Shadow, Ren can get back Catacombs every turn, which is just a nice little growth effect. So leading on Blood Crypt here, because Verdant Catacombs can fetch and shock for a Watery Grave, but not a Steam Vents. So if I need my blue source, I can't crack that to get red on turn 1 for Ragavan. And if I get Watery Grave, then I can't have Renin 6 on turn 2. So I've mentioned it in previous videos. I'm really bad about clicking things before I actually just like explain what's going on. My opponent led on turn 1 Chromatic Sphere. If they had led on turn 1 Expedition Map, I would have led with Ragavan, because there's nothing I could do about Tron there. But because they led on Chromatic Sphere, then Thoughtseize becomes, I can take one of their mana producing targets on turn 1, or mana finding targets, like one of their Sylvan Scrying effects or Ancient Stirrings, something like that on turn 1. And that gives me a much better chance of disrupting. Whereas if I play Ragavan, then they can just like crack Sphere, have their scrying, find Tron, but the Thoughtseize could have actually prevented that. So they find a map off Stirrings, which is good but not great. It means their second Tron land is guaranteed, but they don't have a third one at the moment. Here we're just going for fastest clock possible, get our 2 threats down. Next turn we can like Ren back a land and bolt ourselves or something. Alright. So this is a good point to recognize that like my opponent top decked the scrying, so they're able to find their 3rd Tron land or find the 2nd one, and now they'll be able to map for the 3rd. But unless they top deck another copy of that 3rd Tron land, I pretty much have this turn and next turn to like go wild and try to get my opponent dead. So the plan here kind of shifts to like, what can I do to maximize damage? And that's why you see like fetch shock, play Ren, ping myself. And then I could bolt myself here, but if I don't, then I can save this bolt for if they do find like Tronland Karn or something like that. And bolting myself here doesn't change the clock. I still have 8, 9 next turn, 10, 11, 12. So because it doesn't change the clock, not bolting myself gives me like a little more flexibility. Even if they have like Warping Whale for the Ragavan, I've got fetch and shock down to 4, make Shadow a 9/9, swing for 9, 12. So with Power Plant here, the immediate thought is like Karn the Great Creator, but they play an O-Stone, which means they're dead. And survey says if they're tapping there, I'm kind of expecting them to have like a Warping Whale or something. And then I'm not casting Bolt yet, because if they decided to like make a 1/1, I could have bolted it. Which honestly, I don't know why they didn't make a 1/1. Because if you're assuming your opponent against Tron is like boarding out a lot of their spot removal, so making a 1/1 and blocking the shadow is probably actually a lot safer than trying to Warping Whale the Ragavan, and prevents a lot more damage. But either way, that's match number 1 in the books. Let's go to number 2. Alright, another lost die roll. Opening hand's pretty good. We've got a Ragavan and Bobble on turn 1, basically Splinter Twin. We've got fetch land, instant, artifact to go to the graveyard, and then like 4 chances to flip over Delirium with this Channeler. So reasonable shot at getting Delirium online pretty quickly. Tap Breeding Pool on turn 1 means I have no idea what I'm up against. Like, my expectation at this moment was like maybe it's a Yorion pile or something, but then I noticed I didn't have Yorion. So, Bobble Them sees Seasoned Pyromancer means I am so beyond lost. Like, what deck goes turn 1 Breeding Pool into Seasoned Pyromancer? And then I believe this is the turn they kind of give it away. Wave Sifter. Glimpse of Tomorrow combo. So for anybody who hasn't played against this fantastic pile of a deck, the idea is the card Glimpse of Tomorrow is one of those 0 mana suspend cards like Living In, Restore Balance, all that. That says you like shuffle all of your all of your permanents into your deck, and then like flip that many cards off the top of your library, and you put all the permanents into play. So the deck just plays literally all permanents and ways to make like tokens, whole bunch of lands like oh, what's the stupid one? Green land that makes a 0/1 plant token. So I decided to go ahead and fire off this Inquisition because 3 mana is where all the Cascade spells are. If they have a Cascade spell there, like, pretty dead, right? But they don't have a Cascade spell. Instead, they have a Thoughtseize Bug, Spyro off the top. So I know all these are gone. Decided to just go ahead and bolt that. They can't get tokens back next turn, so whether I bolt it now or later doesn't matter too much. Alright, so opponent passing with 3 mana up is just like, oh yeah, they've got a Violent Outburst, like 200%. And the bad part about Jun Shadow, as compared to like any of the Grixis variants or Sultai or anything like that, is you have no counter magic. You're just at the absolute mercy of anything your opponent can manage to put together in situations like this, which makes decks like Glimpse Combo horrific matchups. Because it's just straight up, they top deck the spell, they win. So their Glimpse here is pretty bad. Like 4 lands and a Titan is about the best I can ask for. Colony Garden's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So my entire thought here is, okay, if my opponent doesn't have another copy of Glimpse, I've got a reasonable chance. But as it turns out, 2 of their 3 blind draws were 2 copies of Violent Outburst. So I could like double bolt the Titan here, but at the moment, like, my opponent's getting close to dead. I've got a flyer. There's always the chance that I could just get out of it from here. But no, they put more than enough good stuff on board with this one. So all of these cards stick around. They get like lands off the Titans. The Tireless Provisioners trigger, get them a bunch of treasures or food so they can gain some life, or just get a bunch of extra mana. Dark Dwellers can allow them to cast Glimpse again, so I just kind of pack it up at that point. Like, I'm not recovering from there. So, game 2. So you've got Hand Disruption into Tarmogoyf. And then if I find like a 3rd land, I can double Shadow on turn 3. So if I have like Thoughtseize to take 2, Shock to take 4, 2nd turn, Shock for 6 total, play Tarmogoyf, 3rd turn, find like a Fetch and double Shadow or something. Like, I've got a really quick clock. So because I have a quick clock plus Hand Disruption, I decide to roll with it. Opponent keeps a Gemstone Cavern hand with a Chancellor the Forge. I think they both like reveal and exile Chancellor the Forge to Gemstone Caverns. But like, that's a-okay with me that they have a this Goblin token, because that just makes it easier to get shadows online. So I believe here, yeah, decide to go ahead and Thoughtseize to get the 2nd Spyro out of hand. I don't really want them, like, doing a whole bunch of outvaluing. Swing in with the Goblin token. And I believe I decided to go ahead and Unholy Heat one of these just to be mana efficient. Do the Goblin token, so if I don't find another way to lower my life total, I can attack into the plant token. I can't really attack into the Goblin token. Then again, mana efficiency. So the idea behind playing like Shadow plus Goyf there instead of double Shadow is, yes, double Shadow has the much higher upside. But I don't want to get into a situation where, like, I draw a 2-mana spell next turn and I've got Goyf and a 2-mana spell in hand and can't do anything. I'd rather just get down, like, 2 comparable threats here. Now, if it's a situation where, like, Shadow's a 7/7 and Goyf's a 4/5, like, I'm going to play the 2 Shadows. But here, we're looking at, like, 0 to 3 extra points of damage if I play the other Shadow, unless you count like really high rolls with Street Wraith into Fetch Land or something, but on average it's going to be between 0 and 3 points of difference, so it's not really like changing the clock. So, opponent can play their Goblin Dark Dwellers here. Oh no, they just conceded here. So they could have played the Dark Dwellers. I don't think they missed a land drop, but decided they would rather just pack it up and go to game 3. Alright. So you do notice in that game too that I did not see any copies of Flusterstorm. Did board all 4 copies in. I guess I could have talked about boarding in the matchup here a little bit more. Boarded out the 4 lightning bolts because I need to be disruptive. Lightning bolt killing like a plant token is not really doing what I want it to do. And I'm a little afraid of going too crazy on my life when they do have like the hasty goblin tokens, which I get isn't the most relevant thing in the world. But they do have flyers like Wave Sifter. They've got Primeval Titans with Trample. They've got Dark Dwellers with Menace, Spyro tokens. Like, there can be a little bit of a risk there. And an Unholy Heat just to try to go a little bit more on like the going wide plan with EE. Boarded out a Ragavan because I saw like the Goblin tokens, and I don't want Ragavan to just get stonewalled. So on the draw, I'd rather cut one back. And boarded in like the 4 Flusterstorms, and I boarded in a copy or 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern to try to stop Dark Dwellers from looping Glimpse of Tomorrow's. Like, more than likely, if the first glimpse goes off, I'm going to lose. But if they whiff, hit a Dark Dwellers, I might be able to, like, stop a train there. And then I boarded in the single Alpine Moon so that I could name the Colony Garden and maybe stop some token production to stem the bleeding a little bit there. So opening hand here, if this swamp was a fetch land, I would probably consider keeping. So I've got like Chandler plus Bobble on 1. I can start trying to find second land for EE on 0. And that's probably one of my best cards in the matchup outside of just like hand disruption. But basic swamp means I'm not doing anything on turn 1. My turn 2 would look pretty mopey, so decide to go ahead and ship that back. That second 7 you saw had like Inquisition, Renin 6, Unholy Heat or something. So like no pressure, no real disruption. This 7 is great. I've got hand disruption, I've got threats. So I believe I just throw back like Bobble and a Tarmogoyf. Yeah. Just try to keep the highest upside. Having like turn 1 Inquisition, turn 2 Goyf. Find another way to lower my life total and get down Shadow. Opponent's got Leyline, double Chancellor. So this is one of those situations where my opponent's got Leyline of Sanctity. I've got hand disruption. My out is for them to not have Leyline plus perfect hand. Basically nothing I can do about that. Like typically in matches or matchups that are bringing in Leyline of Sanctity, there's a decent chance that your opponent kept like a subpar hand because they have Leyline. But if they have a Leyline plus just like the good cards in their deck, you're pretty done. But Michael, you could bring in Assassin's Trophy to deal with Leyline. Yeah, I'm dead if I do that. Let me spend my turn 2 doing nothing, getting rid of their Leyline, giving them a land when all of their things matter on turn 3. Like, it's just a losing battle. Alright, so Petty Theft, my Tarmogoyf. Just fine. Like, I'm just going to try to get pressure down. This is one of those moments where, like I said last game, Tarmogoyf plus Shadow would be more mana efficient, but we're looking at like an 8 damage swing, or 6 damage swing over Tarmogoyf, 6-7 damage. So, let's play the second Shadow instead. And there we go. Survey says pretty good. Like, I'm not dead on board yet until I realize that this Chancellor has text and just makes a bunch of hasty 1/1s. Like, I thought this was just revealed from your opening hand for some reason. I don't think I ever have read the second paragraph of text on here. But Chancellor makes X/1/1 red goblin tokens with haste for X is the number of creatures you control. So they just stack their triggers to resolve the Primeval Titan, get 2 more Colony Gardens, and then Spyro to get a couple elementals, and then just went crazy with Chancellor tokens. So here, even if I block like Chancellor, Titan, whatever, I'm taking more than lethal. So we can pack it up there. Rough one. I'd say that's pretty close to like not unwinnable, but getting up there. Like, you just don't have the tools to interact with what they're doing. None of your cards really matter. Alright, so match 3. Opening hand's really good. I've got a couple good 1-drops. I've got Hand Disruption. I can get Delirium online as early as turn 2. I've got like Sorcery, Instant, Creature, Land. We are on the draw again. Opponent mulligans, so immediately it's like, oh, it's probably Tron. But then they miss and suspend Lotus Bloom, so that's like pretty dead giveaway for the new Tameshi combo decks. So if that's the case, I'm not thinking they have many ways of interacting with turn 1 Ragavan. They might have like secure a Tribe Elder if they just want to like put something on the board. But ultimately, that's not something I'm like that afraid of. So, get to connect with the Ragavan. Probably not casting anything off of their library. More important that I get this this Channeler down, get Delirium online, start really promoting my clock here. Steam Vents and Overgrown Tomb, for anybody who's wanted to try out the deck, is pretty much the ideal pairing here. It gives you the red for all your 1-drops. It gives you your green, which you don't need to pair with the black for anything. But it gives you red and green for Ren on turn 2. It also gives you blue and black if you want to play like Drown in the Loch. So I would say Steam Vents, Overgrown Tombs, like best pairing there. Alright, so flip over Land Inquisition. Opponent chose Teferi Wargate. So because these Lotus Blooms aren't coming off suspend next turn, and they have double things that I can take, I decided to just go ahead and throw off the second Hand Disruption spell. Get both Wargate and Teferi out of hand. Let's go ahead and move those. I feel like that's getting a little too small on the screen. Alright, so they've got 2 Lotus Blooms coming off suspend next turn. Can freely flip lands to the yard because, hey, it's Wrenn and 6. Get back my Blood Crypt. So, I could cycle Street Wraith before that Thoughtseize. If I draw a Death Shadow, like, maybe I want to play it out instead of the Thoughtseize. But I still believe it's right to cast the Thoughtseize there, even though all we see is lands, I believe. Or all we see is, like, another Flooded Strand. Because if my opponent had something like a Omnath, or worse yet, like a Cultivator Colossus or something, then I really need to interact with it there before these Lotus Blooms start coming back. Like, I can't do anything about the top deck. If they top deck a Colossus right now or something, then so be it. But if they don't, then my best shot at disrupting is to get them the turn before they could play one out. So play a bunch of mana. I'm assuming like a finale. Yep. Which I've got this treasure and the lightning bolt. I was not expecting tireless tracker there. This is a spot to remember. So my opponent had the mana to just like go get a not a Cultivator Colossus that they could have, but they could have just gotten like an Omnath here. But one's already exiled with the Ragavan, so I'm kind of assuming they only have one Omnath. Also important there, I bolted with the trigger, the landfall trigger from that fetch land on the stack, because if I let him resolve that trigger and then go to bolt at any point, then he can fetch again, get a second clue, crack both the clues, and grow the tireless tracker out of range. So if I don't bolt right then, I have to wait for him to make the first move with bolt, or with his fetch land. And yes, it's much higher upside if he just goes like end of my turn, crack fetch, and I respond with bolt. But if he doesn't, then I'm just like stuck under this tireless tracker's timing restrictions from now till forever. So I decided I would rather just like give him the second clue and deal with the tireless tracker than spend a bunch of time worrying about timing. So I saw the second channeler on top, but the second channeler didn't change the timing, like it didn't change the clock here. It's still an attack and an attack plus Ren ping. So I decide to play for the upside of trying to find another threat, or not another threat, another piece of disruption to kill like Tameshi or something instead. Find Eladamri's Call. Decide just to cast that so I can like bluff a piece of removal. Maybe it makes them not go for it. Alright, then they crack a clue and proceed to unalive. So game 1 goes pretty smoothly. Game 2, I'm boarding in. What did I board in? Boarded in the 4 Flusterstorm because they've got like Eladamri's Call, Wargate, Finale of Devastation, all those things, which are all pretty important to the deck. So I figured I would try to check those as much as possible. I wanted to try out boarding out the lightning bolts here. They kill Tameshi, but they don't kill Cultivator Colossus or Omnath, and I saw both of those, or I saw Omnath and they play Cultivator because that's how the combo works, or that's one of the pieces of the combo. So I decided to try out boarding out the lightning bolts, boarding in the terminates instead of keeping the bolts in. Ultimately, you could keep the bolts in, not that big of a deal. I boarded in 1 Turok, 1 Soul Guide Lantern, Soul Guide to kind of fight over the Lotus Blooms that have been sacked, so they can't just keep recurring them with Tameshi. The Turok, so that if I get like an early Ragavan or something, I might be able to just like ditch all the resources out of their hand. And then I boarded out a Kroxa and a Wrenn. Boarded out a Wrenn because kind of like all the combo matchups, spending turn 2 on Wrenn's not really where you want to be. And then boarded out a Kroxa because I thought it was a little like slow and mopey, especially on the draw. Like a turn 2 Kroxa is doing absolutely nothing. And turn 4 is too slow when the deck's like potentially going off right then. So really, like Lightning Bolt is the one that I would reconsider a lot. But at the same time, if I've got Unholy Heat and Terminate, I don't feel like I need it that much. Alright, so I do notice his hand is missing green mana. But I do have the 2 Flusterstorms, which means I've got good interaction for like Eladamri's Call, that finale I just saw. Finding Thoughtseize is really solid. Alright, so they've got a grindy hand. The 2 Teferis make these 2 Flusterstorms really awkward. That being said, if I find a fetch land, I do have Delirium for Unholy Heat to take care of them. So I end up deciding to take one of them. So if they play Tireless Tracker this turn, I can Flusterstorm it. If they play Teferi, maybe they down tick and I can Unholy Heat it. Or maybe I can find a fetch land. Do not. But that Inquisition's really nice because now I get to take that Tireless Tracker so it can't get any sort of growing value. And then they do end up minusing the Teferi here, which is great because now I can kill the Teferi and hold up Flusterstorm. And with them only having 6 mana available, there's a decent chance this Flusterstorm is going to be live. Because most of the targets that they're going to want to get are going to be 3 or 4 mana. Omnath is a pain, but I do have the second Unholy Heat for it. I do it with the trigger on the stack so that they can't play another land and make a bunch of mana. Alright, we've got something resembling a clock now. And the hope is just that I can Flusterstorm something like expected Flusterstorm for or not Flusterstorm, Finale for 3 here. Which is right what we were expecting, which means Flusterstorm still alive at this point in the game. And thank the Elden Gods we don't get Flusterstormed back. And hey, look, it's a green source. So we're going to get Cracking, play Tarmogoyf. Can't do much about an Eladamri's Call. Luckily, they only get a Sanctifier on Vec, which is very far from the scariest thing they could have gotten right here. Especially when I already have a Tarmogoyf on the battlefield. But this just kind of like confirms that they only had like 1 Tireless Tracker and 1 Omnath. Which I don't even know if most of these lists play 1 and 1 like that, but could have played the other Tarmogoyf here. Decided to kick the Turok in case they were like sandbagging a Finale and trying to get up to mana to pay for another Flusterstorm. Because I've been holding up blue like this entire game. So it's pretty obvious that I've got something to do there. Then the hope here is that they just don't have another finale off the top. Survey says not finale. The second Omnath, I don't get why they had access to Omnath earlier and chose to get Sanctifier instead, when Sanctifier wasn't even like closing the game out because of Tarmogoyf. But this is where we get into a few sketchy turns here. Opponent's got the Teferi coming off the top. I might be able to find some piece of interaction, but for the most part, this Teferi is probably going to come down and bounce something. Or they just cast Cultivator Colossus, which does not a thing because their last card is Teferi. So now it's all those questions of like, oh, how does our hero get himself out of this one? Alright, so thinking of attacks here. I could jam with everything. I gotta think about like what that gets me. So I know Shadow, Goyf are all lethal. So those three have to be blocked. If I attack with those three, they block Sanctifier on Shadow, Cultivator eats a Tarmogoyf, and Omnath or Arboreal Grazer chumps a Tarmogoyf. So they're left with Sanctifier, Omnath, Cultivator, Colossus against my Turok Shadow. Doesn't seem great to me. It's not horrendous, but it's not great. If I attack with everything, then they've got Sanctifier on Shadow, Arboreal Grazer on Tarmogoyf, Cultivator on Tarmogoyf. 4 gets through with Turok, so maybe they have to consider another block there to respect a Bolt, because surely I wouldn't waste a Bolt on an Arboreal Grazer if I don't need to. But it's just some like potential blocks to think about before you plan out attacks, because you can look at this like, oh, my opponent's got a Cultivator Colossus, it's bigger than my Tarmogoyf, I shouldn't attack. Or you can look at it like, oh, I've got 3 lethal attackers, they've only got 1 guy that eats a blocker, so I need to attack all. But realistically, the combat math isn't that simple. So ultimately, I decide to crash in, and it's mainly because I think that they're going to respect Bolt. And if I put Turok out as a blocker, I think they're a little more likely to put a 4th blocker out there. They call my bluff, but that's pretty terrifying. I mean, they got lethal here. I'm just trying to bluff my way to a win because I can't beat like this continual value. So I've got to do something. And then they skip attacks. I have no idea why they skipped attacks. Like, they must think I've got another Unholy Heat, and I'm just, like, planning on killing the Omnath. But if I had another Unholy Heat, like, I 100% would have fired it off. This turn, because I have the second Shadow, I decided to just attack with them. Because if they crack this fetch and go to 4, gain their 4, they go back up to 8. Shadows are still lethal, so they still have to block both of them. They've got a free block with the Sanctifier, and they can trade with the Cultivator. But at the end of the day, if they do that, like, I get the Cultivator off the board, so that frees up Tarmogoyf. And as expected, like, really, I'm just trying to free up Tarmogoyf to attack. Alright, they got Tameshi, but they've got no Lotus Bloom in the yard, so they can't make a bunch of mana off Tameshi. And finally, we draw something relevant. Now I'm free to attack because even if they survive, I can terminate the Omnath, which means they're not attacking for lethal on the way back. They decide to keep the Tameshi around. So I was thinking about terminating the Tameshi on their upkeep to try to get storm count up for Flusterstorm. But at the end of the day, I decided, like, if they cast anything related to Tameshi, I can respond with Terminate, and nothing really changes. So if they go to cast, like, a War Gate or something for 0, I can Terminate and still get my storm count up. So decided to just pass through. But either way, won that one. Not the traditional way of winning that one, when you have to fight through Sanctifier and double Omnath and Colossus, double Teferi, Tireless Tracker, blah blah blah. But get there regardless. So let's jump into, I think this is round number 4 of this one. Yep. And we win a die roll. Ha ha ha. We're unstoppable now. Win a die roll into, like, perfect Jund Shadow hand. We've got ways to get information from them. We've got hand disruption. We've got a good threat on turn 2. Threat's going to be at least a 3, 4, 4, 5 when we cast Battle Rage. Like, yeah. Alright, so seeing Arid Mesa off the top, for me, indicates burn, like 250% of the time. So what can I do to make my hand the best it can possibly be against burn? Option number 1 is Scry to try to find a Death Shadow, because I've got the Battle Rage. All I need is the Shadow part. Tarmogoyf with Battle Rage is not Death Shadow with Battle Rage, especially against burn. The second option is to try to find a removal spell so that I can deal with an early creature, cut off some of the pressure, and then get Tarmogoyf down and start attacking. The third option is to try to be a little conservative with fetches, kind of like here. And sure enough, it is burn. Alright, so perfect scenario in my head is I take Eidolon, they suspend Riftbolt, I get down Tarmogoyf, and they point Riftbolt and Searing Blaze at Tarmogoyf. Yes, it kills the Tarmogoyf, but it negates 3 points of burn, gets a couple spells out of hand, and I've got like 2 bobble draws, plus a draw for turn, plus the next draw for turn to try to find a replacement threat. So I go with that. Let me get Eidolon down, pass the turn. It's like, I think they're going to suspend the Riftbolt, so I'm going to know exactly what they're drawing after Riftbolt here. So that's why I bobble them. See Skewer. So now I'm finding the shadows amazing here, but more importantly, I think that I can try to make them commit to this spending a bunch of burn spells on Tarmogoyf line. So like if they go Riftbolt the Goyf, actually, yeah, they can't even. Well, they can now with the Skewer. Originally, they wouldn't be able to kill the Goyf because Riftbolt would resolve, deal 3 damage to the Goyf. Searing Blaze would resolve, put instant in the yard, grow Goyf to a 6/7, and Goyf would survive. But instead, they decide to start throwing stuff at my face, which means now I know their only burn spell left in hand is a Searing Blaze. And that's great for me because Searing Blaze does not kill a Death Shadow very well. So get in some chip damage. Play out my double. I could have sworn I played out double threat. Oh well. Could play out the Ragavan there, but I guess technically it does just give like a free target to Searing Blaze. So playing out the Shadow instead is fine. Either way, they can only cast one burn spell. So if I'm battle raging the Shadow for sure next turn, which I'm like 95% positive I am. Let's say they've got Searing Blaze plus Lightning Bolt. If I battle rage the Shadow, I'm presenting lethal, so I don't have to do anything else. It's on them to kill my Shadow, which if they have like Fetch, Searing Blaze, Bolt, doesn't matter, doesn't do it. They could Searing Blaze the Goyf and Bolt it, but then Bolt puts instant in the yard, it grows, so yeah. Pretty much not a thing they can do there. Alright. Game number 2. Opening hand's pretty underwhelming. Like, Channeler's okay, having a removal spell's okay. It's like super low end on the keep spectrum. The idea is that I can answer one of their threats and I can buy some time. Alright, so Sanctifier pretty much means like game over for this hand. Because I can't grow this Goyf out of range quick enough without fetching. Well, I couldn't even grow it out of range with fetching because any spell that they cast, like Searing Blaze, Bolt, whatever, would get exiled to the Sanctifier, so it would still kill the Tarmogoyf. So, whoops, skip through a little bit. Draw Thoughtseize. I don't want to take the damage. Can't afford to, so we're just going to cast spells. See Flusterstorm, which is not doing a whole lot right here. But I can technically fetch and shock and get Flusterstorm if I need it. But ultimately decide to just use my Goblin Guide Scry. Get rid of that. Like my only outs here are draw Shadow, hold up Flusterstorm, draw Battle Rage next turn. Channeler's not going to do it. Sideboarding against Burn before I forget, because it's like my favorite matchup of all time and I want people to be good at it as well. Street Wraiths are like auto removes. It's just 2 life, don't really do anything. I like to board out a Ragavan on the draw. On the play, I might keep the 4 in. I might board one out. Depends how I'm feeling that day. The Wrenn and 6s are pretty dead. You don't want to keep getting back fetch lands against a deck that's already trying to kill you. Like the first Wrenn and 6 activation's good, but the down tick never kills anything. I've started bringing in a copy or 2 of Turok, mainly because all of their interaction is like Prismatic Ending, Path to Exile, Lightning Helix is decent, Sanctifier on Vec, and Turok helps to get around a lot of that. And then bought in the 4 copies of Flusterstorm and brought in the extra Kroxa, because making your opponent discard when their hand is like a critical mass deck is pretty solid. But the big point of contention that always happens is around Thoughtseize. Like, I'm okay with boarding out 1 or maybe 2 Thoughtseize, but it's such a good card in the burn matchup. Just being able to get information about what you need to play around, whether it be Searing Blaze or Sanctifier on Vec, Path, Deflecting Palm, whatever. negating a point of damage or 2 points of damage, or sometimes more if you take a creature that you couldn't answer otherwise, is really, really, really nice. So I think if you're on the side of like, oh, board out all my Thoughtseizes against burn, try playing the matchup a little bit with keeping like 2 Thoughtseizes in. Just give it a shot, see what happens. So game 3, we're back on the play. Hand is pretty good. I've got like Channeler plus Bobble. I've got a removal spell. I've got Tarmogoyf, which Tarmogoyf is best threat in the matchup, like by a mile. Swings through Sanctifier, lets you get a good sized body down without having to spend a bunch of life to get it. 9 times out of 10, you can get your basic somewhere in playing it. Like, it just kind of does everything you want it to do. I already have a green source, so I don't care about the Overgrown Tomb. Alright, so Goblin Guide means I really want to see Hand Disruption off the top here. Nope. Like, I want to see a way to deal with the Sanctifier and potentially grow the Channeler. And that's why I make this play of Unholy Heat on the upkeep. Like, I'm trying to maximize the chances of seeing a Hand Disruption spell. Alas, it doesn't work out, and they get to Sanctifier, but still get to follow it up with Tarmogoyf. Go ahead and get that Steam Vent so that I can represent Flusterstorm at some point if I draw it. And then play out the Peatland because I'm not casting anything off of this swamp, but maybe there's a chance I want to lower my life for Shadow. And then this is one of those fun points against burn. So I do have a punt here in the next 2 turns. And I'll see how many people pick up on it. I don't have double black for Turok. That's not the punt before you start accusing me. But I am going to play out the Turok to lower my life total a little more for Shadow. My opponent's got 2 cards in hand and I've got a Battle Rage. So my thought here is if they've got burn spell, they can put me down to like 3, assuming like Boros Charm, Bolt or something, which I can still cast Battle Rage off of. So I'm not dead to 2 burn spells. Now obviously if they have Bolt, 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 yeah, GG, nothing I could do. Alright. So, I've got options here. Option number 1 is swinging with a bunch of dudes. And let's say they go block Sanctifier on Shadow, block Eidolon on Channeler, Goblin Guide on Tarmogoyf or something like that. If I tap the Peatland and Battle Rage the Shadow, then Shadow goes to a 4 off Peatland, 5, 6 off of Eidolon, which means I'm trampling over for 4 on the first strike, 4 on the second strike, and they're dead between that and my unblocked guy. So the only downside there is I am going down to 3 and leaving myself dead to Boros Charm plus Lightning Bolt. I could attack with just the Shadow And if they go block with Sanctifier, I can Battle Rage without tapping Peatland. And I go down to 5 off the Eidolon. Or I take 2, Shadow grows to 5 off the Eidolon. Words are tough. So I deal 3 for the first strike, and then trample over 3 for the normal damage. I'm at 8. My opponent goes down to 3, which means they can't cast 2 spells without killing their own Eidolon. So they're pretty likely to just try to like swing in with the Eidolon, but that means that I've got like a free roll attack on the next turn to kill them. So that's probably the line I should take. Obviously, if they have like a Path to Exile, that line gets 10 times worse. But I kind of feel like if they had a Path to Exile, they would have played it by now. I end up attacking with the Tarmogoyf 2, which in hindsight was a bad attack because it frees up this Eidolon. Like, and then here's the punt. So I go through all of this life total management in my head before this attack of like, alright, I can just lock them out of the game if I deal enough to get them down to 3, 2, or 1 with this shadow. And for some reason, I reorder blockers to kill the Eidolon. Like, I'm dealing myself the damage off this Battle Rage regardless if I cast it. So there's no reason whatsoever to kill the Eidolon. The Eidolon is like free insurance to make sure that my opponent can't play a bunch of spells and kill me. So I take my 2 off the Eidolon. See a fetch. Doesn't matter. Go down. So this is currently dealing 8. Putting my opponent to 1. But I'm killing the Eidolon. And they scoop. Which I'm assuming just means their hand was like dead. Like maybe another Eidolon or something. And they couldn't get through attacks or couldn't deal enough damage. But I have no idea why I reordered blockers and killed the Eidolon. Because I could have put my opponent down to 1 here, killed the Goblin Guide. They could have attacked through the Sanctifier, but they couldn't cast anything with the Eidolon. If they attacked with like the Eidolon, I just take it. But for some reason, reorder blockers and get bailed out for it. So just remember that if you're in a situation similar to this or a situation with Eidolon on the board. Eidolon is your friend for lowering your life total. He can also be your friend if you get enough pressure for just like locking your burn opponent out of the game. But either way, that is that match somehow. So we get to go on to match number 5. And lose another die roll. So we're 1 for 5 on die rolls. But we get a pretty good hand, like Hand Disruption into Tarmogoyf. Ren's here if we want it. Alright, so turn 1, Naked Dryad Arbor. To me, screams either Bogles or Yawgmoth. Like, Infect likely isn't going to keep a hand with just Dryad Arbor. But either way, I'm going to go on a spree of just like killing dudes if I can. Like if you're going to play a Dryad Arbor with no protection, I'm going to time walk you. And then here I'm kind of assuming my opponent's got a hand that's like pretty clunky. If they could have played Land Bird on turn 1 but chose to play Dryad Arbor instead, like that to me says they needed this Dryad Arbor to untap as a mana source to make the hand functional. So I don't know if they're just like naturally ripping these lands or what, but obviously things look like they're getting a little more out of hand here. But we're going to start casting things. I could have ticked up Ren, gotten a fetch, and like played Bolt the Bird, Thoughtseize, play the Shadow. But ultimately I decided if I could get some more like free value out of Ren, I kind of want to do that. So we got Cord, Strangleroot, Strangleroot Geist, Wall of Roots. I don't really care about the other Wall of Roots. Letting my opponent have a bunch of mana is not the worst when I'm planning on like getting out of Shadow and Tarmogoyf and put them into chump block mode really quick. But the Court of Calling, being able to get a Yawgmoth, get a Geralf's Messenger or whatever is a little more annoying. And then Strangleroot Geist is fine. Drawing the fetch here is actually really nice because now if I wanted, or drawing the shock here, because now if I wanted to, I could give up the Ren, ping the Strangleroot Geist, then bolt it after it comes back off its Undying trigger. But I would rather just like get threats down and hold up the bolt. Like I need to be pressuring my opponent and spending all my turns, spending like Ren and 6 plus a bolt to get rid of Strangleroot Geist isn't really where I'm about. Then they draw Yawgmoth, but I can put them in a little bit of an awkward position here. Like they're going to get to draw a couple cards regardless, but if they go to sack something to target the Strangleroot, I can bolt the Strangleroot, which means they have to sack their other wall, and that gets a few things off the board here. So we're going to try to force that exact play. Like opponent's going to sack a Wall of Roots to target a Strangleroot, or just sack a Wall of Roots, target the counter on the Strangleroot here, or target the Shadow. God, you'll see. I'm going to stop trying to explain things. It's not worth it. Alright. So, Strangleroot dies for good. No Undying, had a counter on it. They try to kill my Shadow. I'm going to go for the old faithful bolt myself. They can sack their other wall and kill the Shadow, which they do. But at the end of the day, like, I get everything but the Yawgmoth off the board. And then just, like, luckily draw a Lightning Bolt. So, you know, better lucky than good, something, something. Then could have played or shocked that in and, like, held up sack Peatland to draw Unholy Heat. But I decided that with 3 mana up, there's not really a lot they can do that I'm afraid of, that I can't just like Unholy Heat on my turn. And then they play the Grist, recognize that I can Ren ping the Insect token and attack him with lethal. So in this matchup, my big game plan is usually, if I've got like multiple removal spells, to try to shut down the mana dorks as aggressively as I can, for 2 purposes. One, it keeps them from having like turn 2 Grist or turn 3 Yawgmoth. But more importantly, it keeps dudes off the board that they can potentially use to cord with or to Eldritch Evolution away. So you'll see that as a recurring theme whenever I play against Yawgmoth. Like if I have a chance to kill a Mana Dork, I'm probably killing a Mana Dork, which is also why Wall of Roots is like my most hated card in the matchup. Sideboarding. So I bring in 1 copy of Flusterstorm because I'm expecting them to board out some number of like Eldritch Evolutions, but Court of Calling is still a really good card. Veil of Summer exists, so Flusterstorm gives a little play against those. 2 copies of Street Wraith come out because my life total is a little bit of a liability. So I don't want to be like over the top. Fetch, shock, Cycle Wraith, or Thoughtseize. Board out all the Ragavans because they just get stone cold blocked by 90% of their deck. Like, it's dead against Wall Roots, Young Wolf, Strangleroot Geist, Giralf's Messenger, Yawgmoth. If they board in like Scavenging Ooze, like there's just so many things that shut off Ragavan, so it's really not worth it. And then I board out the Kroxa, kind of the same reasoning as the Tameshi decks. Like, Kroxa trigger on turn 2 doesn't really do anything, and the card's just like really clunky to try to bring back, especially when your opponent's more than likely bringing in like Endurance and Scavenging Ooze and stuff like that. Board in 2 Turoks, because once we get to like that mid-range point of the game, resources become a lot more limited, so Turok often acts as like a 2-for-1. And then board in 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern to try to fight on the Undying axis. Like, if I kill a dude, I can Soul Guide with the Undying trigger on the stack. If I have Soul Guide out, then they might not be able to go for a big value Turok, or not Turok, Yawgmoth turn as aggressively. So, just gives a little bit of play there. Alright, hand is like super high upside, right? So I've got turn 1 removal for a mana dork or turn 1 threat. I've got, if I find second land, turn 2 Wrenn and 6, which turn 2 Wrenn being able to kill something would be extremely nice. Decide to keep it for the upside. Like, I'm up a game, I'm on the draw, I need some sort of help anyway. This deck covers like a lot of the bases. All I need is to find another land. But opponent did mull to 5, which I should have specified that. That comes into play with some of these decisions here. Since they mulled to 5, I decided payoffs were more important than the bird. Normally, I would go for Bolt the Bird on like a 7-card keep. But when I'm limited on removal like this, my plan is more to deal with the payoff and then try to go for the upside of hitting the land and being able to Wrenn and 6 away the bird. So here my opponent's got the Grist and Yawgmoth. I can take the Grist, so they can't play that out turn 2. And then if I don't find a land, I can Bolt the Bird. If I do find a land, I can Wrenn the bird. And kind of the hope is that my opponent doesn't find like another mana dork here, which Young Wolf is not it. So now it's pretty clear. Bolt the bird. So now opponent's got a Yawgmoth and an Unknown. And my hope here is just no mana dork or no land. Or if they find a mana dork, then maybe I get to find a land for Wrenn. Then go for the double threat here, because next turn I'll be able to Wrenn, get back a fetch land, but more importantly I'll be able to Wrenn scry off the Dragon's Rage Channeler, and I need to find more action. So like if I saw something that I wanted on top, I'm completely fine with like not drawing that thing, or not fetching and playing like a 1-drop so I can draw that thing. Alright, so get the first Wrenn ping out of the way so that if they find the 4th land for Yawgmoth here, like they do, I'm not giving them free Yawgmoth value, which is the same reason that I decided to trade off with this Shadow. Like, if they hadn't have played the fetch land first, then I might have just let it go. But as soon as they played the fetch land, it became, alright, I need to, like, trade off resources on the board. Ultimately, a Yawgmoth by itself doesn't scare me because I've got a couple of these Tarmogoyfs in the waiting. And then this should have been, like, the easiest endurance read of my life. My opponent has 4 mana and they don't cast a Yawgmoth. Like, they're not courting for 1. But for whatever reason, I just like walk straight into that. So this is another one of those turns where I decide like I'd rather have a little extra value off this channeler instead of playing the other Soul Guide Lantern. Or not playing the other Tarmogoyf. Words, I tell you. They're a crazy thing. Alright, so now I'm pretty insulated from any crazy Undying shenanigans. I don't get a blue source with that Blood Crypt because I don't think they're going to be able to kill Ren. And I can always get back to Bloodstained Mire next turn and get my blue source. Yep, so killing the Channeler is fine. Getting back a Ren, or Nurturing Peatland with Ren is also pretty solid. Decide to attack because if they double block, I can just like eat the Yawgmoth, and I'm fine trading Tarmogoyf for the Yawgmoth. Could get a fetch land to shuffle away that Thoughtseize, but kind of decide I wouldn't mind having it because they're kind of at a point where they don't have enough critical mass to cord efficiently, but maybe they do next turn. Which I thought this was a little bit of a strange cord. Because this just means I get to like attack, have Ren and 6 ping, and I'm like almost presenting lethal. Which obviously Lightning Bolt changes that up a little bit, but here just looking for another removal spell. Or I was on my turn cracking the Peatland first, so that if I found one, I could just like deal with Scavenging Ooze attack through it. Not have to worry about blockers, but then they don't block, so I just like Lightning Bolt them for lethal. I don't really know why they main phase the cord for the Scavenging Ooze. Like, they could have done that on my turn, maybe block and then do it and try to shrink a Goyf or something, but either way, they main phased it, and I think that ended up putting them in a really rough spot. Because now they've got a Scavenging Ooze. I can Ren ping, attack, and they're dead to like Bolt, second Ren ping, removal spell on Tarmogoyf plus, or on Scavenging Ooze plus anything. Like, I don't know, just wasn't too down with that attack. But either way, that was match 5. So let me pull the list back up. Talk about a couple of the changes that I wanted to make. So the easy changes are, for one, I'm still not big on Dragon's Rage Channeler. Like, I think the card is very meh. When you've got so many like threats that you really need to have on the board. You've got Street Wraiths. Like, you're not a spell-based deck like the Grixis builds with like Expressive Iterations, Drown in the Locks, all that stuff. Like, you're much more of a threat-based build, and that just makes Channeler significantly worse. So that's probably the biggest main board consideration. In the sideboard, the Flusterstorms were not very good. Obviously, they're a lot better if you actually draw them against things like the Glimpse of Tomorrow combo, or if you see rhinos living in those things. But for the online meta game, Flusterstorm's a little mopey. What else? Everything else is pretty solid for the most part. Like, I wouldn't say there's anything that's just bad in the board. I kind of like having the second Alpine Moon, so if I were going with the Flusterstorms, I'd probably cut the fourth Soul Guide for the second Alpine Moon, and I might try to find room for another just like go wide hate piece, either like a Kozilek's Return, another EE, something like that, just to help out a little bit more when your opponents go wide. Probably second EE. I think there's a lot of random hate that EE gets to take care of. Not only is it great against like Hammer Time, but like Glimpse of Tomorrow, it's great there. It's great against the Indomitable Creativity decks. So it's not a bad, just like extra piece to have in your board. In the main, Kroxa's still not up at the top of my threat list. Like, I like the card, but I don't think it's really good enough, which is really weird to say. It's great if you're playing against a bunch of blue-white control, but that's probably about the only time it's great. Or a bunch of like Jund mirrors, but the likelihood of seeing those is really low. The mana base is... I am not an expert on building mana bases. All I did was take my second and third Blood Crypt and swap them out for a Watery Grave and a Steam Vents. And it's basically so that any of my fetch lands could get a blue source at some point if I needed it. The second list I played, I swapped the Wooded Foothills for Scalding Tarns because I wanted all of my fetch lands to be able to get the blue source any game post. Like, I think this list, the Wooded Foothills, that's what it was. The Wooded Foothills can't get Watery Grave. So if I already have like a tap Steam Vents or Sling and Draw Wooded Foothills, I can't get a blue source. I wanted to try out Scalding Tarn so that all of my fetch lands could get any of my blue sources. And I think I swapped around Verdant Catacombs, I can't remember. But I just wanted more fetch lands to be able to get my blue sources when I needed them. And that was kind of the big one. Scalding Tarn was able to get Blood Crypt, Watery Grave, Steam Vents, Stomping Ground. Just couldn't get Overgrown Tomb, but that's like secondary since you're only running one green card in the entire 75. But yeah, either way, that was the first attempt at the Splash Blue list. I should have the second attempt with it up probably pretty shortly as well. And I think that one's a lot more interesting, but this will give you a good place to start until then.